And now, Steve Rose.
Thank you. So I would like to share with you a few quotes from one of my favorite books, a book called Songwriters on Songwriting, which is a collection of quotes from songwriters famous and obscure about why we do what we do and how we do what we do and where it all comes from. So we'll start off with a quote from none other than Hank Williams. I pick up the pen and God moves it. John Stewart, author of Daydream Believer and many other 60s classics. I'm a radio receiver. I do not know where the songs are coming from, but they're all out there and they just come in. Janice Ian. When you're writing a song and it's working, it feels like 10 or 15 minutes. And when you look up, you see it's been 3 hours. It's like a state of euphoria. West African singer S.E. Rogi. I hear a catchy expression, and I pass it along to my subconscious, and I say, I want a song out of this. He creates the song, passes it back to me, and says, hey, you, take it out. Go use it. And last but not least, no collection of quotes from songwriters would be complete without something from Willie Nelson. There is nothing that can quite compare with being broke and desperate to make a real writer keep working. Thank you, Willie. Is there any beverage up here?
I will give you one right now.
Thank you. So, while he's getting me a cup of water, I would like to start out this talk by making a confession to y'all. I am a spiritual underachiever. At least, that's what I used to think. But when it comes to the spiritual life, I have all the self-discipline of the terrible twos. I would not last a week in a monastery for the simple reason that I could never remember to fold my hands and pray 5 times a day. Until 15 years ago, thank you. 15 years ago, I had never attended church on a regular basis. The closest I ever come was going to Quaker meeting, where I developed a bad habit of falling asleep. So for years, I was prone to beat myself up over my state of spiritual slackerdom. I mean, by my age, Jesus, Buddha, and Hank Williams had all long since fulfilled their career goals. For me, I couldn't sit still on a cushion to meditate without drifting off into the most mundane of daydreams. I was trying so hard to follow other people's spiritual paths that it took a long time to notice that I was actually blazing one of my own. To decide that daydreams aren't so different from visions. To realize that I had been meditating for years. I just called it songwriting. Now, the first thing that people often ask about songwriting is, where do songs come from? Well, many of us songwriters like to say that songs come from a goddess that we call the muse. Writing a song is making a prayer to the muse. You're sending out a request. You're hoping that she will send something back, something other than return to sender. The muse is a jealous goddess. She demands constant attention. But if I keep bringing her flowers, she keeps giving me songs, which is to say, the more attention that I pay to the practice of songwriting, the more often a song will come to me. Now, the great Texas sage, Townes Van Zandt, had another good answer. He liked to say that the songs were already out there, fully formed, somewhere floating around in the ether. The trick was to be at the right place, at the right time, so that he could reach out and grab one as it drifted by. Townes also said that living is mostly wasting time. He should have made an exception for songwriters, because for a songwriter, there's no such thing as wasted time. The muse can strike when I'm standing in line at the supermarket, or when I'm out driving on the freeway. Even when I'm working on something that is supposedly important, there's a part of my mind that is scanning the background chatter in my head. Listens in when I'm talking with friends. Some of y'all who I talked to last night can testify that I have no shame about interrupting a conversation to say, can I use that line in a song? Now, one line at a time is all the muse will generally grant to me. Once in a while, I can pull an entire song out of thin air, but more often I will start with a snatch of a melody here, a poetic phrase there. I collect those bits and pieces in a notebook and in a voice recorder. I try to keep those tools of the trade handy at all times. I call that state of mindfulness courting the muse. So once in a while, I will get a fragment that makes my spider sense start to tingle. It points to something bigger. It tells me that there is a whole song out there waiting to be dragged down out of the ether. Or it's like tripping over a diamond in the dirt, suspecting that there's a whole necklace down below, and that if I go digging, I can put it all together, piece by piece by piece. Of course, it helps to know from experience where to put your shovel. I go prospecting for a song the same place that a mystic goes prospecting for enlightenment, which is to say, inside. St. Augustine was not a songwriter, and yet he beautifully described the songwriter's interior habitat. People travel to wonder at the height of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long courses of rivers, the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, and they pass by themselves without wondering. Those mountains, those oceans, and those stars are all there on the inside. When I'm working on a song, I'm channeling Indiana Jones. I'm stumbling over those psychic landscapes, running from my own monsters, and digging for pieces of buried treasure. So how does all this work in practice? Let me tell you a story, because all songwriting is storytelling. Those of you who were here last night heard this story. For those of you who did not, one December night more than 20 years ago, I was scheduled to play a coffee house in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. I say I was supposed to play because, well, the folks who ran the coffee house completely forgot about the gig. No one showed up to unlock the door. While I was waiting there for Mr. Godot, I wandered down to the beach, which was just a couple of blocks away. For a while, I sat out at the end of a pier where a star-spangled sky was dangling over the dark waters of the Mississippi Sound. And I had a flashback. For a moment, I was 6 years old. I was reading a star chart, and my dad was teaching me about the constellations. Flashing forward back to the present, I tried to pick out those celestial figures in the Gulf Coast sky. Suddenly, a line and a melody came to me. They went like this. A single new star rearranges a whole constellation. It might not sound like much, but I felt like I had just sat on a supernova. The ratio of meanings to words was clearly more than one, but it wasn't clear about what all those meanings might be. The only way to find out was to live with the song, which I did. I wrote 20 or so verses over about 4 years. That's nothing compared to Leonard Cohen, who wrote 80 verses to the song Hallelujah and recorded 4. As I zeroed in on what the muse was trying to tell me, I distilled those verses down to 5. When I was a young man, I used to go walking at midnight Some things appear clearest through eyes that are blinded by daylight. I look to the sky and I'd search for a sign that would show me the road to be taken, till a single new star rearranged a whole constellation. Now I am a sailor with ocean on every side of me, and the stars look so vast, they're frightening, and yet they are lovely. There's times that I thought I would drown in this darkness, no map and the compass to guide me. For there's no night that's as dark as the one that's inside me. We search for a path makes the wilderness safer. We follow our maps, but our maps are just made out of paper. It's only our minds that keep drawing these lines. It's only our hearts can erase them. When a single new star rearranges a whole constellation. Our watches we set by the sun, but our hearts run on moon time. We wait till some miracle comes, turn the night into noontime. But the only true miracles I've ever seen are those sudden and silent occasions when a single new star rearranges a whole constellation. Now I'm not a young man, but still that old midnight keeps calling. I still follow a star, even when other stars are falling, till the stars fade from view and the whole world seems new in the light of the morning that's breaking, when a single new star rearranges a whole constellation. A single new star rearranges a whole constellation. A single new star. Thank you. In my personal case, it turned out that songwriting was the single new star that would rearrange the constellation of my life. I picked up my first guitar in high school over Christmas break. In 1 month, I had mastered the chord changes to "I've Been Working on the Railroad." I was pretty pleased with myself. I was mostly hoping that being a folk singer might help me to get some dates. That changed when I heard my first album by Bob Dylan, and a particular song called "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall." Dylan was singing about nuclear war, but he was doing it in metaphor, in images that were grim and yet mystically beautiful. I walked and I crawled on 6 crooked highways. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. I had never realized that you could set poetry to music. In that moment, my heavens moved. And then and there, I wanted to be a songwriter. I came to feel that there was something sacred about a great song. My prophets were Dylan, Townes, Hank, Woody Guthrie, Joni Mitchell, Nancy Griffith, Chris Christopherson, Pete Seeger, and singers you've never heard of, most likely, like my late friends Al Grierson, Dave Carter, and Tim Henderson. There is legion with the prophets of the Old Testament. Fast forward now to age 30. By then I had spent 4 years as a newspaper reporter in New Orleans. On the side, I was playing a couple of times and a month at a coffee house uptown. It was getting time to make a change. The obvious move would be to a bigger newspaper in a bigger city. But it turned out that the Muse had other ideas. About that time, I went on a backpacking trip, as I was literally gazing down from a mountaintop, back over the course of my 20s. I remembered an old Mick Jagger song. Who reads yesterday's papers? Who reads yesterday's papers? It hit me that if I was going to write anything that might stand a chance of outlasting my lifetime, it would probably be a song. Not long after that, I quit my day job. I moved to Austin. I took a vow of poverty, and I began my pursuit of a glamorous career as a Texas folk singer. In retrospect, I had a thing or 20 to learn about my spiritual path, but that's what spiritual paths are all about. One thing I'm still learning is how to condense a far-flung story into the fewest possible words. In this next song, it is a single word. The word is precious. And as you'll see, it has nothing to do with the Lord of the Rings. Precious is every moment when the sun comes up and the day begins. Streaks of gold in the eastern sky. Praise the one who made these eyes. Precious is every moment when I kiss the lips of the summer wind. Silver stream I must swim and praise the one who made this scheme. Give me the present for all it's worth. Show me a heaven that's here on earth. Precious is every moment when I call you lover, I call you friend. Though we both will forget sometime, blessed are these ties that bind. Praise to the one who makes this day, till every day has to pass away. And when we pass for the final time, love is all we we can leave behind. Let me love and love again this world without end. Amen. See the face of a precious gem in worlds without end. Amen. Precious. That word has multiple meanings, and in the song you hear it multiple times. Repetition is an important part of what makes songwriting a poetic form all its own. Let me say some more about poetic form. Like a sonnet or a haiku, a song uses a distinctive sort of structure to deliver a particular kind of emotional punch. You've probably noticed that most poetry sounds kind of lame when you try to set it to music. And most song lyrics sound god-awful when you take the music away and try to read them as poetry. As William Shatner so memorably reminded us with his dramatic readings of Dylan and the Beatles. The magic of songwriting is in wedding words together with music to touch us in ways that words alone rarely can do. As Nietzsche put it, poetry is language aspiring to the condition of music. Nietzsche was a big fan of Greek tragedy. And if you look closely, many a classic country song is actually a Reader's Digest condensed version of a Greek tragedy. As I said earlier, it's all storytelling. Let me explain. Usually a song comes in 3 acts: beginning, a middle, and an end. We call them verses, but they tell a story. Between the verses, you have a chorus. As in Sophocles, the chorus comments on the story and drives home the moral. The verse is the solo part, while the chorus is collective and invites us all to join in and sing along. Of course, there are also differences between Oedipus Rex and Mama Tried. I mentioned repetition. In a song, you usually hear a hook line over and over until it shacks up in your head like an uninvited guest. I can't quote you all of Hamlet's soliloquy, but no matter how hard I try, I cannot purge my memory of the immortal words of Barry Manilow. At the Copacabana, the hottest spot north of Havana. Y'all are going to hate me for the rest of the day. From a different angle, the repetitious hook in a pop song sounds a bit like a religious chant. The echo of a few words lulls our conscious minds to sleep so that it can etch a message directly into our souls. The message might be Ave Maria. It might be Hare Krishna. It might be Dadu, Ron, 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 Dadu, Ron, Ron. Now, perhaps I'm reaching a bit too far. I mean, when you turn on the radio, whether it's rock, rap, or country, most of what you hear is about drinking, shooting, cheating, or fornicating. Now, how can it be spiritual to be singing about drinking, shooting, cheating, or fornicating? My answer is this. When's the last time you read the Old Testament? I mean, the Holy Scripture is chock full of verses that would make a punk rocker blush. Those ancient saints knew the secret of the sacred. The power of the sacred draws partly from the power of the profane. Like a song by Johnny Cash or John Lennon, the world's holy books tell us stories of real human beings with real human weaknesses and the lessons we learn as we wrestle with our devils and our angels. As Teilhard de Chardin put it, we are not human beings on a spiritual journey. We are spiritual beings on a human journey. Great songs help us to navigate our human journeys. They can point us to new stars, sparkling through the dark nights of our souls. But don't just take my word for songwriting as a spiritual practice. I've talked a bit about Townes Van Zandt, outlaw patron saint of Texas songwriters. I'd like to close by letting Townes speak for himself about how life inevitably has its highs and lows, but in our hearts we are all made to fly. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves to shake the dust off of our wings. I can't say I love you, babe. I can't say I need you, babe. But I'm gonna get you, babe, and I will not do you wrong. Living's mostly wasting time. I wasted enough of mine, but it never feels too good, so let's not take too long. 'Cause you're soft as glass, I'm a gentleman. We got the sky to talk about and the earth to lie upon. Days up and down they come like rain on a conga drum. Forgive most, remember some, but don't turn none away. Everything is not enough, and nothing is too much to bear. Where you've been is good and gone. What you keep is the getting there. Born to live is to fly, both low and high. So shake the dust off of your wings and the sleep out of your eyes. We all got holes to fill. Those holes are all that's real. Some fall on you like a storm. Sometimes we dig all wrong. The choice is yours to make, and the time is yours to take. Some will dive into the sea, some toil upon the stone. Oh, to live is to fly, oh Lord, high. So shake the dust off of your wings and the sleep out of your eyes. Live is to fly, oh Lord, and high. So shake the dust off of your wings and the sleep out of your eyes. Thus ended